Do you want to learn the tricks that top leaders use to get the most out of themselves and their teams? Well, Naftali Hoff is here to help. Lead to succeed. Picks the brains of top leaders to learn about their challenges, insights, and best practices. Here's Naftali.
Hello, Lead to Succeed Nation. It's Naftali Hoff, and welcome to Lead to Succeed, episode 164. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Brandy Burch. Brandy succeeded as a single parent from a non-traditional background to become the trailblazing founder and CEO of benefitbay. This pioneering company revolutionizes employees' benefits and health insurance. Brandy's 20-plus year multidisciplinary expertise in finance, tech, and human capital allows her to empathize with working families while solving complex industry challenges. As CEO, she champions innovative solutions like ICHRA to empower employees and employers. Brandy's data-driven strategies increase profitability and growth. Her mastery of industry trends and ability to simplify complex topics make Brandy an inspiring speaker for diverse audiences on entrepreneurship, working parents, benefits optimization, and more. Brandy, I'm so glad to have you on the show today.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here.
Well, I'm glad I made it through the bio because typically when I trip, it's because they're unfamiliar words, but you had so many sophisticated words in there. I had to make sure that I got them all right as well. So now that I got through all of that, tell us the real story. Give us your background. Tell us who you are, how you got here. We're all ears.
Yeah, I got here through a non-traditional path. I actually am a teen mom. We can say that was my first journey of adversity and overcoming something that's hard. I had my oldest daughter at 17. So I took a non-traditional route through college and did the junior college route for 2 years and then transferred to Emporia State University here in Kansas City. And that was in itself something that was different than most people or most paths that people were taking. They were having a different college experience than I was having. So working and taking little one to daycare and going to college. I knew right away that I was good at numbers. I knew I was good at math, but I already had a child and thought, wow, teaching and the entry salary for being a math instructor is not that high. So what could I do with this math skill? So I went on to do accounting. And in that same adversity situation, I couldn't go to the Big Four. At the time, it was the Big Four because it required 60-hour weeks and travel, and I had a child. So I went a non-traditional path and started in small companies. And that gave me the opportunity to learn multi-roles within organizations, because in smaller organizations, they don't have a different person in HR and in finance and in the office management type responsibilities. They don't have people that are financial analysts. So you're doing a little bit of everything to help that business CFO or that business president to be successful. And I think that's really what my background all encompasses, is all of that multidisciplinary experience. I really didn't care about staying in a significant industry. I've done things from advertising specialty to specialty insurance agency to technology to food production, manufacturing. And that's also allowed me to learn different types of business, different business populations, how different types of teams work together, what a leader of a pork manufacturing innovation technology company looks like versus what a software engineering firm that services large carriers looks like, and what it takes to be successful in each of those. And there's a lot of commonalities that I think people don't realize. And I think that's where I gathered my career and my journey to become the leader that I am today and to land where I am.
Awesome. So I do want to unpack your story more, but just for the purpose of context, in a sentence or two, what is it that you actually do? Like, what is your current company? What do you do? What do you provide?
Yeah, benefitbay is a SaaS technology provider that is solving for individual coverage health reimbursement arrangements. It's a really big word. A lot of people like to call it ICHRA or ICHRAs. And it really means, when we put it down to the elevator speech, defined contribution, allowing an employer to give a defined budget to an employee to make the choice for themselves with their benefit compensation dollars. And that's what we do. It's much more complex than that. However, that technology allows all of the current ecosystem to do its job better and then allow individual choice. And that's what we do here.
Got it. Interesting. Okay, so I do want to come back to there were two areas that were, I guess, percolating in my mind as you were sharing your story. Let's start with the first one I wrote down that just relates to the idea of balance and parenting. You talked about being a single mom and doing so at a very young age where you still had a lot of your education remaining, let alone your career choices and how that affected things. So,
Mhm.
obviously, not everybody's listening has the same story, but many people have at least pieces of it as it relates to being a parent, having that responsibility of taking care of your family. It's interesting because my wife works for a very large company, but for the last I would say about 15 years at this point, she's worked fully remotely. And that's allowed her to manage the home, deal with, thank God, our family, which is not small, and everybody's needs in a way that's a lot easier than back in the early days when she was working in an office, commuting each day, and basically handing over the kids to daycare or to some other, and everybody's situation is different. I'm not saying everybody can do that, but I just see it firsthand, the complexities of trying to take care of your loved ones and simultaneously advance your career. So
Yeah.
maybe you could speak to that a little bit more in a way that you think everybody, could learn from.
Yeah, I think that's the real mom or career woman journey there in a nutshell that we all experience. It's making the choice between your career sometimes and that balance, and maybe saying no to opportunities that we were qualified for or were offered because what's best for our family. And I think throughout my career, I've had to do that. And I don't think what I'd like to do is encourage people to realize that you can still get to that top seat if you take some of those pauses when other pieces of your life need balance. I mean, I was a career woman in the 90s, so I'm aging myself. But in the 90s, it was a lot less flexible. And I'm sure you're thinking that for your wife as well, having to whatever time zone that was before we got to remote work,
Yeah,
whether it came from COVID or if it was something that evolved before that, we have really unlocked a lot of capability for that integration between career, life, family, making sure you can be at all of those places rather than commuting in the car for 2 hours. And I think the organizations and companies who are successful are learning that driven people are going to work best when they can keep their life in harmony. And that's something that's been really important to me and also caused a few more bumps in my journey throughout the time. I also have a
sure,
large family, 6 girls, right? So at different times, you need to be in the car driving to practices or taking to a dental appointment or orthodontics. We can't always rely on a childcare provider for that. So there needs to be some grace inside the organization at times too, but there are also organizations who can't give that grace. So I've been
sure.
in all of those scenarios with the very limited 6 weeks maternity time off that's unpaid or a 12-week leave that is paid. And organizations still in the US are all over the all over
Yeah.
the there.
Yeah, and then you have to make decisions similar to with the benefits, right? You have to be able
Right.
to make the right choices. Wow, 6 girls. I of my six, only two of them are girls, and they certainly occupy, a lot of my headspace, let's say. So I can only imagine. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Anyway, so back to what I wanted to actually the second point I'm not even going to get to yet. I have a new point because you
Yes.
you talked about it just now, and I think it was in your first response as well as a productivity coach, I'm always very interested in decision making because being productive is not just about being busy. It's about making the right decisions about your time, leveraging your time. A lot of decision making done right at the beginning pays off tremendously down the road. And it's not just about time management, it's about all sorts of things, life decisions, etc. So you had to make a number of important decisions, and you had to do so in the context of how does this relate to my children? How does this relate to my quality of life, my roles, whatever it might be? What advice would you give to someone? Is there any particular tool that you use, any particular matrix or system that you use or you find to be useful that you can sort of lay out the pros and the cons and say, these are my non-negotiables, or these are the anchors here in this conversation, and everything else has to sort of work itself around that. What's your process?
Yeah, I don't use a system per se, but I would say work smart, not hard has always been my motto. And I like to take a step back and make sure that I'm looking at what's the best approach to this problem or what's the best approach to this decision. And I like to make decisions fast. So fail fast as well is another thing that I allow myself to do. We cannot get analysis paralysis, which is what sometimes happens to people, which limits productivity. If we don't think through it, though, long enough, we may do it the hardest possible way, rather than the working smart way. So I do take a pros and cons, cost versus benefit, especially in software. There's a lot of cost versus benefit. Are we going to developed this software and what is the benefit long term? What does it save our team? How much smarter are we working if we do this thing? And so those are the ways I make the decision, usually combining the resource cost and combining from a leadership perspective, what is this going to do to improve people's morale? And so there's never, I always say that's the reason why I wasn't great at wanting to be an accountant my whole life, because I liked that gray space. Numbers are black and white. And as a CFO, you may make a decision that is based for EBITDA, but it doesn't improve all these other gray areas, work-life balance for your team, happiness. And so I don't really have a set approach with each problem. It depends on what type of problem it is, but I do make decisions really quickly. Don't have time to overly complicated. It's kind of 80-20. If I'm 80% confident that that's the way to go, I go. I'm not going to get to 99.9. By the time I get there, it's too late and something's passed me by. So that's how I stay productive. And I think as a mom, you're juggling so much, you don't have the time to be thinking. You have to be productive in your family life. There's no time for Netflix and chill. Maybe not very often. Once in a while, we can give ourselves that grace, but we've got to be moving the laundry and doing getting the groceries and planning the meals and getting the dry cleaning done, and plus dealing with our career, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, look, I appreciate your answer very much. I guess where I was going with it a little bit, in my mastermind group, we've been going through Stephen Covey's 7 Habits. So habit number 2 is begin with the end in mind. And habit number 3 is put first things first. Don't ask me all 7. I don't know them, but those 2 are top of mind.
Put first things first. Yeah.
Right. No, we got to do both. And I think you were really in habit 3 a lot with your response. I was thinking also about habit 2, because at the end of the day, he has the famous, what's the word I'm looking for? Not eulogy, but when a person passes, a funeral, right? The famous funeral scenario of the casket and everybody's there. And what do you want them to say about you? Right. So we oftentimes, because of the demands, financial demands, because of let's call it expectations, communal or otherwise, we get very laser focused in our work, and we really try to grow and excel in those areas and trying to please and things like that. And we have to ask ourselves, well, are we doing that at the expense of, let's say, relationships with my kids? We think about Cat in the Cradle or some of these songs where we have to think about balancing the moment and balancing our aspirations on a professional level with the person we want to be and the life we want to live. So I know, I can imagine just based on what you've shared so far that you've given that some thought. I'm just curious to know if you had any additional insight there, especially as a mother, as a partner, et cetera, where you're giving meaningful consideration. Yes, you want to be fast and you want to be productive and you want to make your decisions, but you also want to be anchored, and you never really want to lose sight of what's most important. And sometimes that the rubber does hit the road, and you are going to have to make decisions, whether they're serious, big decisions about stay in the job, or it might be smaller decisions of, do I take time off for this, that, and the other? I'm just curious to know how you approach some of that.
Yeah, I mean, I have an example of one time when I did this in my career. My family needed me, and it was just something had to give, and it had to be the travel and the job and the commute and all of the things that came with that. And it was pre-COVID, and I chose to leave. I'm in Kansas City. I chose to leave Kansas City CFO title tech company to go to an organization that was in San Francisco, was also a software company, but to be a senior HR BP. So shifting from finance to be a senior HR business partner, but I would be able to work remote and I would earn a little bit less than I currently made. However, all of the intangibles for my family and where I'm anchored is that my girls have strong relationship and confidence in that they matter to me more than some career title or something I'm chasing at work. Really, work is about providing for my family. Work is about making a difference for other people's families. And it is about a means to an end. And I don't know if I always like that word, but it is about providing. And that career aspiration for me has always been about being a good example for them, that they can overcome adversity and that they can do these things on their own if they ever have to, that they can be strong and they can dig in, but not about putting them second. That being said, there are times in my current career, we have a seasonal time period, which is right now we're in it, where October to February demands a lot from me. It's very intense, but I do get to work mostly home. So I can take, to school in the morning and I can run upstairs and have a snack. And at least we can get those connection points. But I am on a plane fairly often in this window. And I just have to make the time when I'm here really matter. It's quality over quantity. That is also something I'm very passionate about. Being in random meetings at work, that doesn't make sense, right? Just have an actual objective and meet that objective. And when you're with your family, be present. Some people are present with their family in large quantities of time. They may not connect as meaningfully as you do when you're really grounded in the places that you need to be in, making those times matter.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, we can certainly go a lot deeper there. That was a great response, and I'm trying to be more mindful as
Yeah.
somebody who's just been head to the ground and trying to develop my coaching career after years in education and school leadership. I do want to come back to something you talked about at the very beginning,
Yeah.
where it almost felt like by default you wound up with broad exposure, filling in a variety of roles, learning different roles, etc. And many others who pursue a career, whether it's in accounting or IT or whatever it might be, software development, typically are laser focused on learning and excelling in their particular area. If you were advising somebody who's new
Mhm.
that they could choose a path where they can go, let's say corporate, and they could really just focus in on their one thing and everything else will be handled by other people. Or you could go to a proverbial mom and pop type operation and roll up your sleeves and get involved in many different areas, not so much from a financial discussion, because it could be that there are clear benefits to one or the other in that respect, but just in terms of developing as a person, as a professional, and as a leader. Do you have advice there as to which path do you think would be more rewarding?
I think the mom and pop or the get your hands dirty, roll up your sleeves and solve lots of problems and learn multiple skills will teach you lifelong career items that you can't get in the corporate. I do understand the corporate, if you're in finance and you start out at Morgan Stanley, that's what you need to do for your career. You need to go to that next role. But at some point, you've got to get into an organization where you can see all of the areas of a business if you want to be able to make a difference in leadership, because there's it's really easy in a very narrow focused role to feel like you know everything because your role is so controlled and you have no capacity for empathy for what everyone else is experiencing in an organization because you're shielded from it. And I think that's why it's difficult to really learn the full leadership acumen you need to be at the highest seats of an organization. It's because you just don't get the exposure. You don't get the experience. You don't get the exposure. And you also don't have to stretch yourself. I think where we grow the most is leaning into things that are not most comfortable. And if you went to school for something and you're in a really narrow field, you're doing what's comfortable. You're not stretching yourself into any other area. And so I would vote all day long to take the non-traditional path. However, that doesn't serve you well if you need to raise venture capital. So I have seen it doesn't always serve you well. There's a certain criteria of you've attended these 12 schools and you've done these two things when you first got out of school. And if you check those boxes, it's really easy path. If you don't, it's a little harder. You've got to be a little farther along to raise those same dollars. So those things, all with a little caveat, right? Depends on what your end goal is. So you said, start with where you want to be. So just depends on where that is you want to be. But if your desire is to be a leader and to one day own your own company, roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty, learn all different types of pieces of the business.
Yeah. So I thought you were going to go here, but I think that this is a good follow-up to what you were saying. And so let's say I find myself in a large corporation and it isn't a natural or obvious expectation for me to do anything but what I'm actually hired to do. Any advice there for somebody to find a way to get involved, roll up their sleeves in a way that wouldn't feel awkward or invasive, but simultaneously will give them the exposure? Because you hit on an important point. I'll just use my own experience. So I'm a classroom teacher for years. I don't have immediately any type of administrative experience. Eventually I became part-time administrator and then headmaster. But in those early years, I'm seeing everything from the narrow lens of the confines of my classroom. When I become a school leader over time, I need to change my mindset completely. I often call it shifting from me to we, right? So the me is all about my own self-promotion, my own growth, my trajectory. But now, or maybe I'm a salesperson, then I get promoted to manager of a sales team, whatever those look like. So now my whole focus is on the success of the collective. But I only learned to think that way because I transitioned my mindset away from the very narrow what's good for me to the broader what's good for the institution. So what advice would you offer to somebody who is feeling sort of boxed into their space to be able to learn what it's like to run a business, learn what it's like to lead a team, so that when the opportunity presents itself, or maybe they could even pursue it more aggressively because they feel that they have that skill set?
Yeah, I think top of mind is offer to support others, whether they're dotted line colleagues in other areas who appear to have a lot of them on their plate, if it's appropriate within certain political environments of large corporations. I think try to make your leader's job easier, and that will allow that leader to build some confidence in giving you additional pieces of work. Ways I can explain is I've had lots of individual contributors who are only cared with me. They only care about me and what I have to do, and they're always looking to be served. And the individuals who demonstrate leadership skills are always looking to be of service to the organization, to the leader they service, to their colleagues. And then they're able to get involved in those other pieces and maybe get, whether it is even just to help with a PowerPoint or help with a presentation for that leader, for executives above. You're not going to get that experience until you offer those services or to lean into them. And so I think sometimes people may say, well, I want to get out of here. I've finished my work and I'm done, because they've got that me versus we, or I'm looking to be service, or I'm looking to be of service, right? So I think that that's what I would do. And I think you can lead at any area of the organization. You show up and everyone's gossiping and, complaining about, right now it's benefit season. Everyone's getting together and complaining about their benefits. Look, they took this much away from me. You can be a part of that continued problem, or you can try to look at the positives. And often those decisions are being made because it may have lost an employee. You may have had to cut employees if you didn't change something, right? Or everyone doesn't realize that it's because Tom's wife is facing cancer and it's caused a insurance risk problem for the overall pool, right? And so things are just beyond the capacity of that individual contributor role, and having that awareness and looking for where you want to go and keeping that in mind is really important, because there's always someone watching, number one. Number two, when you make a difference and make an impact, your leader will notice, and you want to be that positive piece of that notice. You don't want to be on the radar because you're always on the negative side of that equation either.
Mhm. So let's flip it to the leader now. I'm just curious, would you say the way you were describing it, it felt like it was nature and not nurture, in the
Mhm.
sense that people either come with, a service mindset, or they come to be served mindset. I'm curious to know what you think about leaders being able to cultivate such a mindset, nurturing it, establishing a culture that this is what we do here. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think career pathing and working with that individual to pull out what you're seeing in the potential of individuals is something that great leaders can do. A lot of times, individuals who are offering of service often don't have the confidence to believe they have those other skill sets either. So it's a combination of seeing that they have the right attitude and the spongy willingness to learn, but also building up their confidence to believe that they are capable of more than their individual contributor role and there are other things they can grow into. So I think there's that. I think we could coach as a leader the ones who come nature versus, the ones who come looking to be served. I think you can challenge them with the right feedback and you can also develop their career. Sometimes it's just the blinders. And until I've heard this twice in my life, I'm a very direct communicator to my direct reports. Some people like it, some people do not like it. Twice I have had really poor performers who were very much bad attitude individual contributors who contributed to bad culture. And I provided very direct feedback and very clear pathing, and they did not successfully change that behavior. So they were no
Hmm.
longer part of the organization, but on the exit way out, I
Yeah.
very clearly provided good examples and directives. And later in their careers, they thanked me because I was the only one who was honest. They had
Right.
actually lost roles before. Rather than being told you're just being laid off or you're part of a
Right.
RIF, I had real feedback. And so
Hmm.
I think that that's the hard part of leadership. You have to not only nurture the easy to nurture,
Yeah.
you have to nurture the ones that are prickly, right?
Yeah.
So you might get poked a few times and it's really difficult. So you've got to lean into that.
Yeah. I've just been listening to a book called Let's Talk, which really unpacks the whole idea of feedback and coaching. And it is
Mhm.
really interesting. It really is interesting to think about different ways by which, as a leader, you are looked at, the way your feedback is delivered, all those kinds of things are important. I also am more direct than indirect. It's
Mhm.
funny because one of the trainings that I do relates to personality types, and so understanding your personality, not only from a leadership standpoint, but just how you work, how you process information, how you think about things, etc. And so it's called True Colors, and it's based on four colors, and I'll spare you all the details, but I identify largely with what the color green, not only because I happen to like the color, but because
Yeah.
it's more about people who are problem solving in orientation. So I don't need
Mhm.
all the fluff. I don't need all the
Yeah.
the empathy. I don't need all the backstory. Just tell me the issue. Let me solve it. And the contrast is the blue, who's very empathic, very much a people person, wants to connect with you first before even delving into the issues. So, being able to, even in my emails, where I find that it's also important with communication, oftentimes with electronic communication, we don't realize that intent gets lost. We don't
Right.
realize that people can't catch irony, they can't catch intent. Even with emojis, it doesn't quite work. So you got to be super, super careful to buffer. And for me, wanting to dive right in, sometimes I forget the good morning, or some kind of salutation or something, just to preface the business element of the communication. So it is something we all have to be mindful of, regardless of the person we're talking to. But I do think that what you're saying is very valuable, because you do need to be able to give the right kind of feedback. And I think at the end of the day, people, as hard as it can be to hear things that are not ideal, better that, because ultimately I can grow from that. Like I wrote two books. My first one, Becoming the New Boss, could not have happened without a lot of feedback that I received, even though I was doing a pretty good job, but clearly not a great job in some
Yeah.
ways. And that's a result of it, because I was able to take that feedback and move with it. So last question for this segment. which is
Yeah.
also about feedback, but not necessarily direct, maybe more in your own head. Share with us, please, Brandy, the biggest mistake that you've made in the past that positioned you to greater success moving forward.
I think the greatest mistake I made was caring about what people thought. And I think that that was personal and professional. I tell this story to my girls. Sometimes they look back at my pictures. I cut my hair in a bob. I wanted to look 40 when I was 25. I needed to look the professional. I had a lot of that imposter syndrome. I had an accounting manager job when I was very young in my 20s. And I constantly was worried that I didn't go to the big four and I didn't, take that same trajectory. I don't think anyone who worked for me or with me thought of those things. That was something that I thought of all the time. I thought about it as being a young mom. Thought about it as a teen pregnancy being a shame. I thought about all of the judgment, and I was just constantly almost paralyzed by that. I
Mm-hmm.
had a form of OCD in my home in my 20s
Mm-hmm.
and early 30s that I wanted my house to be picture perfect all the time.
Mm-hmm.
If someone came over, it was like fresh vacuum prints, right? And I was stealing myself, I was just robbing myself of any joy with my family, any joy in my career. And it's
Mm-hmm.
just the biggest waste, all of that, beating yourself up, comparing yourself to others, looking at exterior appearances of someone else's life or path to where they've gotten. And I think what it has done for me now is that I went through a divorce, unfortunately. So I had to face it one more time. The shame of, I wouldn't tell people I was divorced. I'd worked at a place for 14 months and they'd say, oh, you're a poor husband. You have 6 girls. And I just would just let it go by because I just didn't want to tell them. And until I leaned into owning fully who I was, did I grow.
Mm-hmm.
And once I did it, I mean, the career has just skyrocketed. Once I said, I don't care that I'm not a
Mm-hmm.
CFO and I'm going to be a senior HRBP. That role and that ability and that courage for me to tell everyone who told me I was stupid, like, well, this is what's best for my family. And I don't care what you think. And a title doesn't mean anything to me until I got myself to really be that. My career was a little bit cramped into this thing I was making it. And it was a little more rigid. And my family life was
Mm-hmm.
a little more rigid. And I have my oldest is type A, she's a doctor. And she says I gave it to her, right? Because she was raised in that window of high anxiety mom.
Mm-hmm.
My younger girls have experienced a much more free mom who I'm doing the best I can. I give myself grace. I fail fast. I make decisions. I'm clear. I believe clear is kind, Brene Brown, but I'm also vulnerable and I'm open and I'm not trying to be something that I'm not. And I'm not trying to hide that I went to junior college and then and then got my MBA and not until 2015 and only had to go back and repeat some classes because I had a low GPA. I would have been mortified for someone to know that. But I had a low GPA because I had 2 children and I was working a job and going to college. I need to give myself a pat on the back for that. I didn't have the same path as everyone else. It took me a lot of years to really feel all of that. And I don't know where that comes from. We can call that counseling. We can call that just enough growth journeys. We can say that that was just a part of going through various things. But um, that's really, I think, the biggest mistake I made was just caring about other people.
Got it.
And at this
Wow.
point, that's all gone. It fell off of me.
Yeah. Well, I can
Yeah.
totally commiserate because I don't care as much perhaps as I should. My wife tells me, don't post that, someone's going to see
Don't
it,
do
or
it.
don't say that, right? Don't do this. I get a lot
Yeah.
of don'ts in my family, and we're
Yeah.
very conscious, and I'm a little bit less conscious. It's for better, for
Yeah.
worse. That's just the reality. So sometimes it's to my
Just be
to my detriment.
authentically you, right?
Authentic living. That's exactly right. That's
Yeah.
exactly right. So let's stay authentic here. We're going to do some rapid fire where the
Okay.
answers are short and sweet and give us a little bit of a different um, insight into who you are. A
Okay.
cool thing about Kansas City, few people know.
That we have a really trendy restaurant scene and a really trendy like happy hour scene, and we're kind of like a little unknown city that people aren't aware of.
Yeah, that's true. My stepmother who passed away unfortunately recently, she's from Kansas City, and so we'd hear about it. I never visited, but we'd hear about it quite a bit.
Yeah.
A book or quote that's impacted you profoundly.
So I think Clear is Kind has really impacted me from Brene Brown. I do receive a lot of feedback about the direct communication, but I do see that a little more empathy and ambiguity sometimes loses the direct feedback you were trying to provide. So that one for sure. I
Go ahead.
Otherwise, business books, Good to Great, Built to Last. I like all of those. I'm always trying to learn how to keep this business moving forward at the speed it needs to.
I have to be careful with the next one that we don't go down a rabbit hole here, but let's
Okay.
see. A myth about employee benefits that you'd like to debunk.
Um, wow, that employers or people really want to harm their employees. I think it's just very complex system that can be harmed by just an individual health claim, and it's unfortunate.
Your favorite way to unwind after a long day.
I'm a bath taker, so I think that came from having six girls. It was the place I could escape. I will go run a bath, just take a bath.
A role model who has influenced your career.
A role model who's influenced my career. Oddly enough, I nannied for a lady who was a CPA, and that's what led me to be an accountant. And I don't think she still knows this, but it was in the 90s, still green paper. And she invited me in. So back to leaning in, children were napping, she was working from home. She invited me in and taught me purchase orders and various types of things. And I had never been exposed to an accountant. I'd only been exposed to nurses and teachers in my family. And I think that that was all the difference maker that leaned me into really business in general.
Awesome. If you could give one piece of advice to working parents, what would it be?
I think to give yourself grace, but also try to turn off the phone and put the phone down and don't take the laptop into any of the family areas.
Love it. A food you could eat every day.
Anything Mexican food, but tacos for sure. I could eat anything Mexican food every day.
A dream vacation spot.
I love the beach, so any beach anywhere. I'm trying to touch different ones all the time. I've got a little favorite in the Caribbean, but I want to continue to go to other countries and various beaches.
Your go-to karaoke song during one of those happy hours.
Oh, Lordy, I don't like to sing karaoke. I don't even have one.
I don't
So,
either. I
yeah.
did it once and I
I think
wasn't
it's
as
a
good as I
heavy
thought I would
rock
be.
song that we sang once that I went with the ladies, but I can't even remember.
Okay, let's move on then. The most used app on your phone.
Most use app LinkedIn comes
Okay.
with running a software startup with limited budgets.
A superpower you'd love to have.
Oh, wow. Duplicate myself in the working world, have someone else take my flight trips.
Fair enough. Just show up, right? Just show
Yep,
up
I would just show up. Yep.
show up in your destination. And then
Yeah.
finally, a productivity tip that helps you to get more done.
I'm still an old-fashioned notebook person, so I keep my to-do task and I cross them off as I go. It helps me feel almost like I accomplished something. With so much technology, it gets overwhelming, and every once in a while, I just like to reflect on what I've accomplished in my journals, and then I've had them.
Awesome. So, Brandy, how could people connect with you further, learn about your work, benefit from what you do?
Yeah, so they could connect with us at benefitbay.com. That's the company that I am the CEO of. So they could go there and learn a little bit more about what we do there. They could connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm fairly active on LinkedIn, at least post once a week and share things about being an operator, being a female in the career world, or anything that we're doing there. I have a Twitter, but I'm not very active. I just can't get all the socials down. It's a lot. Already being out
Hire
there.
someone, delegate.
Yeah, I need to hire a social media person. That's the next thing. That's the big mistake I haven't done yet. Yeah.
Okay. So we'll have to see how we could point you in the right direction. Okay,
Right.
before we wrap up, please, you've shared a lot, different areas. We went deep in some things, and I appreciate your honesty, your vulnerability, and the power of your message. But please do leave us with one final life lesson before we wrap up.
Yeah, just I think it's don't sweat the small stuff and just keep moving forward. You can one step ahead of the other and you're going to make incremental improvements.
Okay. Well, that's always sage advice. Thank
Yep.
you. It's been an absolute pleasure meeting you and hearing your story. And thank you for the wisdom, the inspiration, and just the open candor of real talk from real leaders.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye-bye now.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode and for investing in yourself so that you can lead to succeed. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the show. Your feedback gives the show more social proof and encourages more folks to listen.